Good morning. Sorry, I was going to say good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robin Hirth. I'm the FEI-AZ administrator, and I would like to introduce you to our past president, Rachel Stewart, who's going to run our meeting for us today. And as I bring Rachel up to the stage, we'd like to welcome you and hope that you're all staying safe. And let me get her up here. And Rachel, when you get up here, take it away.
I was already working on happy hour.
No kidding. Sorry about that, folks.
Oh, that was great. That was great. Hello, everybody. I am Rachel Stewart. I was past president of FEI, and I am going to welcome you tonight because Adam Remus, our current president, was unable to join us. And so I'm so glad to see you virtually all, and hope you're all doing well and staying safe. So it's been a year since our last meeting, and we are happy to say that we're starting to look into our next live meeting. So hopefully we will be meeting for sure in September and earlier if we can pull it off. So I know you're all probably really looking forward to that. I know I am. So we'll see how things play out. It looks like the numbers are going down. More people are getting vaccinated. If you happen to know a really elderly person that needs a ride, I really want my vaccine, so I'd be happy to drive them. Just message me. We want to thank all of our sponsors that are with us tonight and for their continued support while we go through all this and we're meeting virtually. They are a big part of what makes us successful, and we look forward to when we can all get back together again. We do have some events coming up, again, still virtual, but on March 18th, Clifton Larson Allen is having a webinar on Arizona incentives for business opportunity zones for operating companies and Arizona facilities, tax credit panel discussion. Woo, that was a mouthful. But it's going to be a really great virtual event, and they put together a panel of experts. So it'll be very interactive, very engaging. I hope you can join us for that. And then we also have some fun plans. So we are going to roll out a virtual poker tournament on March 25th. So we just need to get the invite out to everyone, and that will be soon. So be looking for that. And there's no limit on who can join that. So hopefully we get a lot of participation, and it's a lot of fun. That's being hosted by Head Farmers and Ultimate Software. So, and then we need to do some other things too. So we'll work on that. Just keep opening your emails and reading them and joining us because we miss you. Okay, so before I introduce the speaker, I do want to remind you about the CPE. So there's CPE credit for tonight, and there's going to be, during the presentation, there'll be 3 questions that you have to type in your name and a letter answer in the chat feature, and then we can record your participation, and then you'll be eligible for the CPE. Okay, so now given all that, let's go on to our program with Denise. So Denise Logan, she keeps people and deals from falling apart. She knows that to business owners, selling a business is more than a transaction. It's an emotional period of transition. There's highs and there's lows. There's no clear vision of what waits at the end for them and their family. So she's mastered helping people get through that challenge. She has a background as a lawyer, a social worker, and a business owner, combined with 2 decades of research and thoughtful leadership on the subject of work, money, and meaning, and it's made her a popular speaker to over 3 continents, so that's pretty exciting. And she speaks to them regarding business succession planning. She's written a book, which everyone that signed up and gave their address, they'll be getting that book in the mail, so that's exciting. She also has provided advanced training to advisors employed by some of the world's largest financial institutes, law firms, and accounting firms, and she's helped those clients successfully transition their business to new owners. So she, I'm sure, would be a great resource to many of us. She is known as the Seller Whisperer, and she is the author of The Seller's Journey. And so we would like to welcome Denise, so everyone give her a virtual golf clap. And Denise, come on up to the stage. And then Robin will bring her up.
Yay, there I am. We managed to make that happen virtually every single time. Like, we've made it happen. Thanks so much, Rachel. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. You look fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we were scheduled to do this sometime last year and we got waylaid. So thanks for including me as
We were, yeah. So I think Robin's going to take me off the platform and then it's all you.
oh, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being here. It's my pleasure to join you from my upstairs loft office. And I wish we were all in the country club enjoying a drink over cocktails, but I will tell you I had some fascinating conversations during the cocktail hour, and I'm looking forward to seeing how some of those weave into our story today. This is going to be interactive. So in addition to the questions that you'll answer for your continuing education, I'm going to ask for volunteers now and then. And if you're willing, you raise your hand and Robin will invite you onto the stage. Just as if we were live, we'd be doing the same kind of thing, because I think one of the ways we learn best is by interacting one-on-one. So I come to this process partly from my own experience. So in my early life, I was a mental health professional, and then I was a lawyer. And I watched deals unraveling for all the reasons that were not what was being said. In fact, I saw it happen in my own business. I reached a point where I was sick to death of it, would rather put a stick in my eye than run my law practice one more day. And I did a super ugly, choppy exit of my own business and got rid of my house, took off, and bought a motorhome. Some of the folks that I was in one of the tables with, we talked about motorhome travel, and happy to meet you for a cocktail tonight later and chat about that or anything that you hear tonight. But when I came off the road, I was here in Phoenix visiting with a friend who had a business, and he was preparing it for sale. He said, "Why don't you join me and help prepare it for sale?" So I was with him for 10 years. And we took that business to the market 3 times. And he was never able to let go. 3 separate attempts. And do you know that's not really all that uncommon? Less than 1/3 of the deals that go to the market actually successfully close. So what we're going to talk about tonight are some of the ways to be able, whether you are making an acquisition or whether you are planning to help with the sale of a business, how to help make that process easier and smoother for the owner. So feel free to dump your questions in the chat box or raise your hand, and this is going to be a lot more interactive. You know, for the owner, this is a transition. It's not a transaction. And sometimes what will happen is we fall back on the transactional part when the emotion gets too high. Some of the things you'll hear tonight, you'll be able to use in any other form of negotiation that you're using, and you may even see how they play out in some of your interactions with your family and friends. You'll hear me tell some stories tonight. Don't get caught up on the particular dollar amount or the industry sector. What we're really talking about is the arc of the journey that an owner goes through. And at any point where a deal gets hung up or negotiations fall apart, we're going to talk about some tools that you can use. Listen to the stories and try to spot who might you be in that tale and where might this show up in your own practice or in the business that you're part of leading. I'm going to start with a story of one particular owner. This was an $85 million deal. 8 weeks from close, the seller suddenly announces that he won't take a penny less than 9 times EBITDA. Never mind that he had already signed a letter of intent at 6.2. So the investment banker called me and said, "I think my seller went crazy." I'm like, "Yeah, it sounds like it. Let's see if we can figure out what scared the fella and what hidey hole he went into and whether we can coax him to come back out." So when I got involved, what I learned was that the seller's original plan was to sell the business, buy a sailboat, and sail around the globe. You know, you can get a pretty good boat for 85 million bucks. So it clearly was not the money issue. What I learned was that 2 weeks before he asked for this unicorn, his wife said to him, "I'm not doing that. I do not want to be stuck on a boat with you far away from my grandkids. It's not happening." And can we agree he is not coming back to the deal team to say the deal is off because my wife won't let me do what I want to do. There's no chance. Instead, he asked for something that they couldn't produce so that when the deal fell apart, it wasn't about him. And he could walk away with his sense of integrity intact. So when I sorted out what was happening, I did some one-on-one work with he and his wife separately and brought them back together with a solution where he would buy the sailboat and sail, and every 6 weeks, she would take one grandchild, fly to where he was, and they would do 2 weeks on land, building memories with the child. Excuse me. Then she would fly home and he would sail on. Boom, the deal was back on track, closed on time at its original asking price. Excuse me. The reason for that was because it was never about what it looked like it's about. If you were to take one thing from our time together tonight, that's the message I want you to take. It is never about what it looks like it's about. There's always something going on under the surface. And if you're able to be the person in the room, we've called tonight being the quiet hero in the room. If you're the person who is able to discern what is really going on underneath the surface and find a way to resolve that, the deal will get back on track and close. And you will see that this is playing out in almost all of the conflict that goes on. But if we come back to this sailboat story, I can tell you that it wasn't even about her not wanting to go on the sailboat. If we get even a little deeper into what was happening, they as a couple were experiencing something we call relational grief. If you think about it, as individuals, we know how to prepare our children to launch. All along throughout their life, we're talking to them about what will you be when you grow up? Do you want to go to college? Will you go to trade school? When are you going to move out of my house? Some of us might be having that thought right now. But we don't wake up until on the day they're 18 and ask them that question for the very first time. And yet somehow as business owners, we're led to believe that when the time comes, we'll know. We'll just know. And at that point, we'll be able to launch. The same process that we go through with our children is what we often need to be able to prepare for business owners. How do we launch? Because the practical reality is that every business owner will leave their business, voluntarily or involuntarily. Often when I hear a client say, well, if I leave my business, usually I'll pause them and say, the word is when, not if, right? So we'll talk tonight about those things that make it hard for them to even think about, how will I leave? So back to our folks on the sailboat. For any of us, normally I might bring some up on stage here, but I'm going to do this just with you. If you and I fell in love and we're like, oh, we can't wait to have this really great life together. And then we get married and we have a couple of kids. And this is what happens. We hardly even see each other, only in passing, because the kids and business and life interferes. So when the last child is launching off to college or out of our house, we catch sight of each other and we're like, oh, who are you? I don't know you. In fact, I don't even know if I want to know you. All of us today know some couples who haven't been able to navigate that transition point. For our business owners, their business has often been that. It's been another child that has been a distraction at many times. So for a couple like the ones that I was talking about, what happened is here they've had this dream their whole life. We're going to spend all of our time and energy in the business. We're going to double down on it, whether they're both in the business or only one is. And then as it gets close to the exit, one or both of them realize, I don't want the same things you want. It takes effort to be able to address that with our spouses. And for many of us, we're unwilling to do it. So for a business owner who that happens, what we watch is that they bring the business back in again and again and again. They ask for something that becomes a blockade. as a way to not have to deal with the grief of everything I thought was going to happen isn't going to happen. Hopefully that makes sense. Normally, if we were in person, I'd see you nodding your heads. I can't see you nodding your head. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat box. Coming back to this story, what we see is that it was never about the boat. It wasn't about the money. It was about what was going on underneath the surface. And that leads us into what makes it hard for owners to let go. You know, some owners do a thing that I call the oh my syndrome, one more year. So we know they're ready to go, either as an advisor or as someone in their team, or sometimes we even know it for ourselves. But if we can't solve these things that are coming up under the surface, we'll defer. We'll say, you know, just one more year. We often see it where an owner gets pretty far down the process of a sale and then pulls out. They're like, I'm just not ready. Or they throw up roadblocks that we're just like, that doesn't seem quite right. Those are warning signs for you to realize it's never about what it is. So let's talk about a different situation. This fellow was in his mid-30s. You know, we often think about business owners and sellers as being of a particular age. Often, I was talking with a wealth management group, and one of the folks in the room said, well, I don't really have any clients who are ready to sell their business. I was like, are you sure? And he said, yeah, you know, none of them have reached 60 yet. And it was hard for me to not laugh out loud because, you know, business owners exit all kinds of different ways and times. And so there is the voluntary way where we choose this is the time. And then there is the death or illness or a great offer comes across the transom that we can't refuse. So this particular owner, his name was Michael, and he had a software company in Southern California. He was in his 30s, and he was set to net $16 million on the other side of the deal, which is a pretty good price for that stage in his life. So as owners often do, one night in the middle of the night, those things that wake us up. In fact, I wrote a column a couple of months ago called Scary Things That Go Bump in the Night, the things that wake our owners up when they're close to the end of a deal. So this happened for Michael. He woke up in the middle of the night and realized, who am I going to hang out with? All my buddies have jobs. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have all this money and no one to do anything with. So he was shooting pool with his best friend, and he said that. To which his best friend responded, boo-hoo, dude. I wish I had your sad little $16 million problem. You know, that's a natural reaction that we might have to a friend or even a client, like, hey, you'll figure it out. But the reality is he didn't figure it out. Instead, he felt ashamed that something really so normal, everyone thought he was foolish. And so it went underground. And he started acting it out in the deal with all kinds of squirrely things going on. So one afternoon, Michael and I went for a walk, and I said, hey, what's going on? Something's happened for you. And he told me the story of being with his friend. I was like, you know, we can work on that. That's something we can do. We don't have to wait until you've exited your business to figure out how you're going to solve for these problems. What Michael was experiencing is the unmet needs that will be on the other side of the deal. So think of this for yourself. And if you're an advisor or you're an owner or you're helping an owner, this is a question I'd love for you to ask. Ask yourself and ask the other person. What does work provide for me? What does work provide for me other than the money? Because we can often get caught up as deal professionals focused on the money. Well, you're going to make X amount of money. Of course, it'll be great. We should be able to get somewhere between 12 and 15 distinct answers to that question. What does work provide for me? You know, the first ones that come up are probably a little bit easier. Do you want to type them in the chat? Does anyone want to do that? You don't have to, or someone want to raise your hand and we can pipe you in. What does work provide for you? So we have, oh wow, they're coming fast. Robin, can you read them? Wow, these
Yeah,
are
we can see
great.
them.
What kinds of things are coming in from folks? Can you read them for me?
Sense of accomplishment, a sense of purpose / meaning, social interaction, family, belonging, friendships, early retirement, learning opportunities, challenges of tasks, teamwork, mental stimulation, health insurance, travel, service opportunities.
Look at all of that that's coming in, you guys. Exercising skills, helping others. Keep them coming because there are a lot of things that work provides for us. The second question becomes, where will I get these needs met after I exit my business or outside of my business? And can I start getting those met now while I'm still in my work? Because what happens is those are the things that start churning up as an owner gets close to an exit and they realize, some of the common ones that I hear, and there'll be a little bit of repetition from what we've seen in the chat, but also ones to help you start thinking. So it's a place to go. Haven't all of us during the pandemic been like, when do I get out of my house and away from my spouse? I want to get out somewhere. It's a place to go. There's structure to our day, a sense of purposefulness. Our friendship, because for many of us, our coworkers, our peers, our employees, our vendors, our customers are also our friends. Where will we get that intellectual stimulation? How will we be connecting with others? What is our place in the world other than our business? And then we get down further into the list, the ones that are harder for people to acknowledge early on, but things like power. At work, you say you want something done, it probably gets done. At home, maybe not so much. And so we start looking with an owner. It used to be that you ask someone, so what will you do when you sell your business? And they'll say golf and travel. And I'm like, very funny. No, really, what will you do? Because golf and travel will only take us so far. And some of you on the call might be thinking, it'll take me pretty far. I'd like to travel and play golf. But the reality is for us, retirement will not look like it did for our parents and grandparents. We're not going to be satisfied playing golf and waiting for Wheel of Fortune to come on and think we have a satisfying retirement. So helping our owners think that through and have them have a really clear plan, it serves several things. One, it helps them from getting derailed. But the other thing it really does is when things start to get difficult in the deal, it gives them something to be pulling them forward. Otherwise, the lure of money is typically not enough. And when things get hard, as it often will in a deal, I think about the process of a deal like the children's game, Chutes and Ladders. Do you know that game? I grew up in Canada where it was called Snakes and Ladders. I actually think Chutes is much better. If I was naming a children's game, I don't think I'd put the word snakes in it anymore. But if you think about how that game goes, you roll the dice or you spin the dial and you're trucking along the board and all of a sudden you hit a ladder and you're like, yeah, you climb up, you think this is going great, I'm on my way to winning. And the next spin, you hit a chute and you're pushed way back down the board. And it's so discouraging and demoralizing, especially when you're way up at the top of the board and you think, I'm almost home. Oh no, chute that takes you way down. As professionals, we know that's going to happen. We've seen enough deals. We're like, oh yeah. In fact, there's an old saw that every deal dies 7 deaths. But for our clients, for a business owner, that is so demoralizing, and it can crash them emotionally. So being able to be certain that we have things to help pull them forward other than just the money is really a key. You might be thinking in your mind, if you're a professional or even if you're in the middle of a transaction, you're like, I don't have time for this. My question to you is, do you have time to work on deals that don't close? Because if you work on a deal and it doesn't close, that's a tragedy for everyone. Certainly for you, because it's wasted effort and time. But for the business owner who doesn't sell their business, the ability to come back and do it again is diminished. And for many of those owners, the only way they are going to fund their retirement is from the sale of their business. It is also a tragedy for their families, their employees, and their community. So we have a responsibility to do better at this. Sorry, you might be thinking, we're going to talk a little bit about uncertainty and how it shows up and why trust is important in the process. Sometimes I hear people say, I have to be part-time psychologist in any deal. I'm like, yeah, we all do, in anything, in any experience, because uncertainty is going to create fear. And you might be saying, sometimes the person I'm dealing with is just acting like a child. That could be someone in the transaction. It could be another professional. This is a place that I'd love to ask for a volunteer. Someone willing to come on the screen with me and play a little bit of a game? Someone out there must be a good, brave volunteer to come on. Anybody raise their hand? Oh, Jonathan Kaiser. Come on, friend. Oh, Rachel's in.
I'm back.
She beat you, Jonathan. We'll do it another time. Hey, Rachel, thanks for coming on with me. So we're going to talk about the psychology of what goes on and the neurobiology of how fear shows up. Jonathan says you're always a better volunteer than he is anyway. All right. Well,
we're both big hams.
We may work him into something a little later, or we'll call for another volunteer. So what I'm going to do is, your hand is like your brain. We're going to use it as a visual tool to lock this in. The thumb part of your hand is the amygdala. It's the fear sensor. It's the part of your brain that is always scanning the horizon, looking for danger. It's a helpful part of our brain, but it's also kind of a stupid part of our brain, because it can't distinguish between real danger and old imaginary danger. So imagine this. If Rachel, when you were a little girl, you were attacked by a bear, your amygdala, I know, look at how, did you see her face? She was like, oh my God, I've been attacked by a bear. That was you know what, that was not rehearsed, and that's pretty fun, because that's exactly what would be going on. What would happen is her amygdala would spot a big black dog and think, is that a bear? And it would cause the very same face that we saw happen for her. She would have a startle response. So the amygdala, which is also called the lizard brain, because it's the oldest part of our brain, and it's a little bit like a lizard. It doesn't really think, it just reacts. So do this with me, Rachel. Take your hand and bring your thumb across your palm and bring your fingers over the front. One of my clients calls this a girly fist, because as he reminds me, no man would put his thumb inside his fist. But all right, you're with me. We have the amygdala tucked safely in. And this part of our brain, remember we're making a little brain, is the prefrontal cortex. It's the thinking part of our brain. It's actually here. Now do this with me. If you're playing along in your house or your office, move your thumb. What do you notice, Rachel?
Yeah, you can't move it.
Now move your thumb a little more aggressively. What do you notice?
It actually hurts my thumb.
Yeah, and if it keeps moving, the fingers are less tight.
Oh, okay,
right?
yep. I'm
And
holding
then
on. I got a death grip.
Right. Rachel's got a really firm prefrontal cortex going on. She's like, you stay put, lizard. Now, if that amygdala, the fear sensor, gets activated enough, you will flip your lid. Have any of you seen that where someone flips their lid? Mm-hmm. You're in a transaction or in any conversation and it's going along great. And all of a sudden, the other person, you're like, what happened? What happened was that their fear got activated enough. Boom. They literally popped their prefrontal cortex off. We're not able to think when fear has taken over. The reality is that all day long, we're all walking around in various stages of tucked in to fully wigged out. All kinds of things scare us. Jonathan says now he's really glad that you were the volunteer instead of him because he doesn't want to have a bear attack. So now play with me a little bit more here, Rachel. So our hand has 5 fingers, luckily, a thumb and 4 fingers. Fear shows up in our life one of 5 ways: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and submit. I'll run it again for you. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, F-A-W-N, like a little baby deer, and submit. So you're probably familiar with some of these. Fight, you know, I know. Freeze, right? Fight, flight, you know that. That's the runaway response. Freeze, that's the deer in the headlights look. Fawn, in a business setting, looks like this. I'll totally get you those documents. I will, I promise. Yeah, but it's people pleasing, it's over promising, it's what is happening inside your body is that your brain is so scared. It's saying, I will say or do anything I have to. Don't hurt me. Submit. If you have a teenager in your house, you know submit. Fine. Whatever. The reality is that we will use all of these tools at different times, but we're wired to use 1 or 2 or 3 of them as our go-to. So for me, I'm wired to use freeze, fawn, flight. Once you know that about me, you can actually watch it happen. I'll get really still or calm or pause. Then I'm going to overtalk and then I'm out of there. By the time I get to submit or fight, none of these have worked. So Rachel, what do you use?
Well, I'm definitely more of a lover than a fighter, so that's out. I would say I would at some point I would submit, like just be sarcastic and just be like, I just don't have time to argue with you. Just whatever, just do it. Definitely I would do that. Maybe fawn, flight. I would do flight. And then what was this one? Freeze. No, I don't think I would do freeze. So I think I would do submit, fawn, and flight.
So those of you who are listening in, notice for yourself, what are you? If you are having a hard time identifying what you are, think about your spouse. Because you can probably spot this pretty quickly in someone else. It plays out in every team meeting. It plays out in every transaction. It plays out in your house. And the reality is that we're triggering each other all the time. So if I'm going to be a fighter and Rachel is a submitter, what's going to happen? I'm going to get big and aggressive and Rachel's going to give in.
Yeah,
if she doesn't,
an aggressive way for sure, but yeah.
And what happens often is we use our coping mechanism, and then once we're able to get away, another coping mechanism comes in. So you might submit and you get away, and then you're mad. And then you're going to be like, oh, that's your passive aggressive. You're like, fine. You literally lay down, fine. And then you're like, how am I going to get that back? We see this play out in transactions all the time. So the key is knowing for yourself, how do you show up in the transaction or in any conversation that you're having, so that when it begins to happen, you can say, oh, I'm scared. What just scared me? That's how we bring our prefrontal cortex back down so we can think. Boop, boop, right? We want to be with our thinking brain. Thanks for coming on with me, Rachel. You're a good sport. Robin, will you ask the first poll question?
Oh, folks. Again, please, if you need CPE, please type your name and the letter answer in the chat, please.
And the question is, what is the amygdala, the emotional part of my brain, called? The foolish brain, the lizard brain, the bossy brain, or the thinking brain? Great. So are you done with the poll?
Yes.
Okay. The correct answer is B, the lizard brain. So often I'll say, once we've done this work with someone, I'll say, your lizard is showing, because this is really what happens. We're just all of a sudden triggered. It's about understanding what happens and watching for it in other people so that you notice, when I get big and angry, the other person does that, so that you can help to regulate what's going on in a conversation by stopping part of what you do. You know, there's a myth in deals that time kills all deals. And the truth is, it's not time. It is unprocessed emotion. And when someone says time kills all deals, you can bet that their fear is in the room. That's usually someone who says, if this goes further, it's going to fall apart. That's their fear. What really resolves deals and what resolves negotiations is slowing down the process enough to understand what just caused someone to react. It's about having enough stamina, your emotional stamina and theirs, to get all the way through. So there's something that goes on. We're going to talk a little bit about attachment theory, because this triggers our brain. So as babies, we are wired to attach. If we don't attach, we die. That's the biological and psychological piece. So imagine what happens to our poor amygdala if we feel like we're about to be sent away or overwhelmed. So do this on your paper. Draw 3 dots in a row, and I'm going to tell you what to label them. It's a good visual for you later. So the middle dot, write the word anchor, like off a boat, an anchor. On the left dot, call that island, like a desert island. And on the right dot, call that wave, like a wave coming in over the boat. So anchor, island, wave. What we're talking about are 3 different types of attachment style. There's not one that is better or worse. They just are how we learn to behave. So an anchor attachment is someone who can tolerate too much closeness or too much someone pulling away. They're basically an anchor. They can ride out the waves. That's someone whose amygdala is not going to be triggered too quickly by chaos. Think about the island. For an island person, when there's conflict or chaos or someone is pushing them, they are going to pull away. They are going to literally go to their desert island, run off, ghost you, pull away. Now think about that other point, the wave person. For a wave, any sign of upset or disruption is going to cause them to rush in. And you'll hear them say things like, are we okay? Are we good? Are we good? Are we okay? They're the person that is blowing up your phone all the time in the middle of a deal because their uncertainty has tripped their amygdala and now they feel afraid. Which one are you? This is our next polling question. When in a stressful situation, I tend to react as an island, meaning I retreat to safety and wait for it to blow over. As an anchor, I stand steady and am able to tolerate others pulling away or rushing in. Or C, a wave, I need to make sure everyone is okay and need reassurance myself. Or D, a combination island or wave. I rush in and then I pull away only to rush back in. Just another second or two for you to get your CPE. Anyone else need to answer? So there is not a right or wrong answer to this. This is a self-reflective question, saying, who am I and how do I show up? The reason it's important is understanding who you are and understanding who else is involved in the conversation with you. Because an island and I'm a wave and you pull away, I am going to rush in unless I know enough about myself. So the truth is, I'm a tsunami. If you were really to ask me, I'm an extreme wave. Because I know that about myself, I know that when there is upset, I have to stay really steady. Because if I rush in, any other island who is in that transaction is going to pull away. So if you're waiting for a document and someone hasn't produced it, and you feel a desire to like text them, call them, send them another email, rush, 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 you're exhibiting wave behavior. You are likely to cause that person to pull further away. And P.S., if you're an island and your tendency is to pull away, you can expect to chase you. So try to recognize who you are in the transaction and who other people are. Because by trying to get yourself, there's no right or wrong, but generally an anchor in a transaction is the person who stays steady while everyone else is rocking. That person can help to calm the storm and make sure that things continue on. But it doesn't mean you're disconnected from your emotions. It just means that you're conscious of how you show up and how you can change that to make it safer for other people in the transaction. So we have our third poll question. Which of these techniques will work best when someone is upset and threatening to walk away from a negotiation? Reminding them of what they stand to lose and the consequences to them? Telling them, just calm down? Threatening to walk away first? Or slowing down the process to understand the context of what actually upset them? I love seeing your answers come in. I feel like I should ask a fake poll question, which is, if your spouse was answering this, what answer would they say you do instead of which one you know will work? Now I'm just playing with you. You know, we often think that transactions unravel for all these unpredictable reasons. The truth is that it is absolutely predictable what can happen. And we have so much more control over how we contribute to the dynamic. You can watch this play out when anyone in a deal or in a negotiation or even in a conversation at home. As soon as you watch this happen, you will spot it so many places. So if you take away one thing from tonight's conversation, it really is, how am I contributing to the chaos that's going around me? How can I shift what I'm doing to create a greater sense of safety for the other people so that we can have way more prefrontal cortex and less of the lizard running our deals. You're each going to get a copy of the book that I wrote called The Seller's Journey. And we're going to do some questions in a minute, but I just want to give you a little framework for the book. It's written as a business fable. It's the story of an owner 1 year after he sells his business. And he goes on a trip across Glacier National Park with his banker, his lawyer, his wealth manager, and the private equity buyer who bought his firm. And I always have to say, everyone comes back alive in case you're worried, because you wouldn't imagine someone would want to go on a trip with those folks after doing a deal. As they cross the glacier, they relate the physical obstacles they're facing to the emotional obstacles that he faced in letting go of his company. It's designed as a way to normalize what's happening for an owner. And a lot of the concepts that we talked about tonight, you see play out in the story. So it's a good refresher for you. You can offer it to an owner or to another advisor to help them see this is just normal, and you can get all the way through it. So let's do some questions, and then I'll do a last little wrap up. Anyone have questions? You can raise your hand, either type it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll bring you on stage to ask it live. No questions? Will we have to make up the questions? Hey, Rachel.
This is a tough group. They're all CFO-y type people, so kind of nerdy and kind of quiet. And I can say that because I am one. Let's make up some questions, Denise. What are some of the questions that you hear when you are out and speaking to financial groups like this versus like, say, maybe actual entrepreneurs? So how can the CFOs come along and help their owners?
Yeah. One of the best ways to be able to help an owner is to make sure that the advisors that you bring in are folks who are just as concerned about the owner's transition as they are about the transaction. So when you're interviewing an advisor to help you, a banker, a lawyer, whoever is involved in that transaction, they're going to be technically proficient. And they're all going to be really happy to tell you about their transactional prowess. One of the questions to be asking is, how will you be able to help the owner through the natural changes that they're facing? Mm-hmm. A question I would ask every single advisor who is going to work with me on an exit is, how are you planning to exit? I might ask my advisor, so what does work provide for you? Because the advisors who have done this kind of work to answer that question for themselves have so much more empathy. They will actually be able to help. So you absolutely want someone who's technically proficient, but you also want someone who is thinking as much about the transition as the transaction. That's a sign that they will also be able to help you when things get rocky.
Do you also find that asking the owner, what do they want out of the transaction, maybe more so than just the proceeds, but are there other things that owners are looking for that maybe they don't even realize you have to help them see?
Absolutely. You know, something that's pretty common right now is we'll hear, especially if it's a private equity backed deal, private equity firms will say, well, you know, sell now and you can get a second bite at the apple later, right? You'll take some money off the table and then you'll stay in the business and you can get another bite. Well, that works great, but how many of us have ever been in a situation where you've ridden in a car and someone else is bossing you while you're driving? Have you liked that very much? I haven't liked it. So how about if that's the situation that you're going to be in, where someone else is going to be giving instruction? It's going to be really important to know how you interact and how you're able to cope with someone else giving instruction, and not to just get lured by the, oh yeah, I can take more money later. Will that work for you? And of those needs that someone is getting met by owning their business, when some of those tasks go away, will they like it not having so much power? Or will they like it not being in the biz dev role and having so much friendship or interpersonal connection?
Do you think also that you need to maybe clarify for them if they think they want to leave some kind of legacy with the business they're selling, or how will that attachment, I mean, it can be like their child in some cases, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I do a whole other lecture on legacy and how work, money, and meaning weaves together. Super important as we retire from any work, whether it's as a business owner or in any job. How do we let go? So there's an art to it, and it really is. Legacy means many things, right? Imagine an owner who has put all of their energy into designing the logo, and someone new is going to change that, or take the sign down, or move the company. Or, I was involved in a transaction a while ago, and the owner had several antique cars, and they were stored in the basement of the office building. And the buyer said, "Oh yeah, well, you can still store those, but you'll have to pay market rent for those spaces." Which just seemed like such a dorky thing to be arguing about. And the deal almost unraveled over that. It was definitely not about the price of the parking spaces. It was he couldn't take those cars home. His wife was like, "No, you are not bringing all those cars home." And he actually had them kind of hidden and stashed away in the office parking garage. So and over and over asking, "What do you want?" Sometimes we have to prompt them and get a little deeper into what are the things that they're not talking about that they also want.
He needs to find a wife that likes cars.
I hear a second business on the side for you, Rachel.
I love good old fashioned muscle cars. Laura asked a question. She says, "Do you find the same issues come into play before the sale process starts?" Do you know what she means by that, or do we need to get her to clarify?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these are actually happening long before the sale comes. Often I'm asked, when is the right time for an owner to sell or to begin this process? And it's 5 years before they think they're ready. Because it takes longer to be able to process it. And I always say there's when you think you're ready, and there's all the things you need to do beforehand. And for an owner, we know that the process of selling a business will often take months or years. So when you still have enough mojo and juice to be running your business is when you want to sell it, not when you're like I was. "Oh my God, I can't do it one more day." Because the ability to make it through the transaction is super hard at that point. So yes, all of this is going on long before. You see it even when, as a consultant comes in and makes a recommendation about changes to happen. So I had this happen. A consultant came in and said, "We can save you X percentage of dollars because what we can do is negotiate with this key supplier." Well, what was going on in the background was the owner and his wife socialized with that supplier and his wife. So imagine what's going to happen when you as the consultant come in and you're like, "We can squeeze the price down." That's all groovy for the bottom line of the company. But what's going to happen to that owner and his wife and their ability to socialize with their best friends? Do you not think he's going to get an earful from his wife when her best girlfriend can't go on vacation because you squeeze down the supplier? It doesn't mean to not do it. But what I often see is there are things that make business sense that an owner is completely resistant to. Guess what? This is an emotional component that's going on underneath. And that savings in the bottom line is not worth the crazy crisis that he's going to have at home. So understanding that can also help us. Those are some of the things in answer to the question, what's going on before the sales process? All of this. What's going on in your team meetings? Yeah.
Susan asked or commented that she has seen when companies are acquired and the key players leave once it is someone else directing the focus. Tell us about maybe your experience with that.
Yeah, it happens. It happens a lot. Less than 20% of owners actually stay throughout their entire earnout period. So there's often a little carrot out there. Well, if you stay 2 years or 1 year or 3 years, you'll get this big payout. And less than 20% of those owners are able to stomach it. And that means that we haven't done the really good work early of trying to discern, wait, how are they going to get those needs met? Because if what I loved in my business I can no longer do, I won't be able to stay. Good questions.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Denise, we sure appreciate you coming on and speaking to our group. And so glad that it finally happened after a year since we had scheduled it last year. We would love to have you stay on and visit with us in the networking. I think Rob will be coming back up, but I would really like to encourage all of you to stick around for a little bit and say hi to your peers and have fun. And if you have any other questions for Denise, you could speak to her directly. So thank you so much, Denise. And Robin, if you can come up, then we'll continue on to the networking.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'll do the clapping. You can't close
I'll take a Zoom bow.
Thanks, Denise. And again, a reminder, everybody, you will be mailed a copy of Denise's book. So look for that in your mail, and we'll have networking open until 6 o'clock for anybody who wants to stay. And Denise will be on the floor, so you can ask her any additional questions you may have. And again, thanks to all our members, sponsors, and guests for coming tonight. And FEI exists because of all of you. And so we want to wish you a good afternoon and be safe and stay healthy. Thank you. I'll take you back to the floor. So hold on.
Thanks, Robin.